So, as Nintendo fans and gaming fans, we live in really interesting times. With Nintendo's brand new console, the totally wacky and revolutionary and completely amazing Nintendo Switch right around the corner, there's a lot about Nintendo that seems like it's changing. There's a lot of mistakes it seems like they're trying to fix. There's a lot of brand new innovations and new ways to play that they're trying to bring to us, the gamer and the Nintendo fan. And it's really exciting. It's super, super cool. Of course, there are always detractors. That's kind of the common thing pretty much throughout the entire gaming industry, at any time, with any company, and of course, more specifically, we always know it comes down to Nintendo. And through this new face of Nintendo, what I like to consider the new face of Nintendo, there is, as per usual, quite a bit of questions that a lot of us have about what Nintendo's ultimate motive and goal is going forward. We know that they're always bringing to us a whole new way to play with the Nintendo Switch, which is really exciting and something that a lot of us can't wait to have and to own and do on a regular basis. But of course, something else happening with the Switch, which is something that seems like it's been Nintendo's MO the last few years and now the last two generations, is whether or not they decide to focus on the power and the graphics and the innards and the specs of their console, as opposed to some different innovations and some different gameplay functionality and some cooler control ideas. Stuff that I love about Nintendo, and I think that Nintendo more often than not does get right. Obviously not always. We know that they've tended to mess up here and there, and they've had a couple of things that obviously haven't panned out the way we want. But for the most part, when they try new, unique, kind of wacky, crazy ideas and things, I think they tend to succeed more often than they fail. Which is why, one of the many reasons why, I think the Switch is going to be great. But obviously, a lot of us know that the consistent conversation, and something that seems to be continuing now with the Switch based on what limited information we have until we know the full details and people get their Switches and pull these things apart, is what they're doing with the power of the console. The fact that the Switch does seem to be, again, so all the signs are pointing to, and even some released spec sheet that I think they put on their website that I couldn't break down if my life depended on it, it does seem to be, as of right now, a couple of weeks before it launches, that their newest console is, as per usual, like I said, more underpowered compared to its direct competition, the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. Leading into the launch and, all the discussions and the reveals and the Tokyo event for the Nintendo Switch, a lot of people started to wonder and speculate if it was going to be at least as powerful as the Xbox One. That's what a lot of us were hoping for. And then there were all these people that just love to talk about rumors and have all these leaks and things on the internet. And some of them were leaking things that would either say, yes, it's going to be as powerful as an Xbox One, or maybe even a PlayStation 4. Or no, it's not going to be that powerful, it's going to be weaker. Now that we've seen a lot of it, a lot of us have had a chance to get our hands on it, and now we're just a couple of weeks away. That spec sheet was put online by Nintendo, like I said. It does seem, hearing other people who really understand specs way better than I do, it does certainly seem to be and look as though the Nintendo Switch will not be as powerful as its competition, the 8th generation Xbox One and PlayStation 4. And through that, it got me thinking about really just who Nintendo is as a company nowadays as opposed to 15, 20 years ago, and what it is that they might be doing going forward and what we'll see out of even the next couple of generations from them. So one could argue that it's a little bit dangerous and maybe even a little unhealthy to start thinking about future generations, especially future Nintendo generations, now that we're only 2.5, 3 weeks away from a brand new one. It's like we probably really should be more focused on what's about to come to us that is in fact brand new. That being said, I think that this conversation still is building off of what Nintendo's getting ready to unleash upon us with the Switch. So ultimately, what am I getting at here? What I'm trying to ask is whether or not we will ever see a Nintendo that is going to come back to putting the specs and the power and the graphics at the forefront of their business model and the forefront of their products and their hardware and their consoles and handhelds. And I do think that's a relevant conversation to have. With the preface that, for any of you who know me, you already knew I was going to say this. I don't really care about graphics and specs all that much. I am completely satisfied with the power that the Wii had. Compared to its competition, I was completely satisfied with what the Wii U had, and as it stands, I'm completely satisfied with the Nintendo Switch that we've all seen gameplay of. I've had a chance to play and see it in person, and when we compare what we know of the Switch compared to the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, I am more than satisfied with that. A Nintendo that focuses more on quirky ideas and unique controllers and gameplay and quality games first, above specs and power and all the architecture under the hood, that is the Nintendo that I love, and that is the Nintendo that I am okay with existing for all time. That being said, I do think it's important to have a conversation that maybe represents a larger gaming audience and also acknowledges the fact that all of us, no matter what you say and how much you may disparage the importance of graphics, just like I tend to do, at the end of the day, we all secretly love great graphics, you guys, and there's nothing wrong or unhealthy with admitting it. It is completely okay to accept and acknowledge that, hey, great graphics, brand new graphics we've ever seen, the best graphics available on the market at any one time, all of these things are totally okay, and they are exciting, even if it's not a requirement for any one of us to enjoy our games or our gaming companies, like Nintendo, for example. It's still great to see great graphics, you guys. And so that's why I think it's interesting to consider, will Nintendo ever come back to being that kind of company? Because they were that company in the past. They were that company with the Super Nintendo because it was much more powerful and capable than the Sega Genesis at the time. We all know the Nintendo 64 was the business when it came to power and graphics and 3D technology and all this new computing power that Nintendo was doing, where they were technically at the forefront of that technology, even though the PlayStation with its disc system did do some things that the N64 at the time couldn't. Still, the N64 reigned supreme in terms of power. And then when you get to the 6th generation, one of my favorite generations and my favorite Nintendo consoles, the GameCube, that was, although not the most powerful console at the market at the time, the last time we saw a Nintendo that really was trying to push power and tech. They did some unique things. They went with proprietary mini discs, which some people naysayed, some people championed and supported. I was totally fine with them. I freaking love the GameCube and those little tiny ass discs. God, I love those things. And that really was an amazingly capable system. It was even more powerful than the most successful console of that generation, the PlayStation 2. So like I was saying, that was the last time we saw a Nintendo that was really, I can't say all about the graphics and power, but was about the graphics and power enough to have an extremely beastly little console on the market and a lot of games that looked absolutely spectacular and next gen. Then the Wii and the Wii U obviously changed that, and we're now with the Switch leading into a Nintendo that seems to be very comfortable not pushing being so graphically intensive and powerful, and we want all the big specs numbers that gets all the tech heads really excited. That Nintendo seems to be gone for now. And like I said, you know, reminding you guys, I'm completely cool with that, and I think Nintendo can survive forever without being this tech, you know, graphics power hungry kind of company. Doing what they do, they can continue to be extremely successful. I mean, the Wii is a great example of that, and I think that the Switch is going to continue that same legacy. But will Nintendo ever change that? Will there be a point where maybe Nintendo feels like, okay, changing all of these controller and interface ideas and doing all these wacky, gimmicky, I know some people hate the use of the word gimmick, but it applies enough. It's a simple term for me to get across here. These gimmicky ideas, maybe they're going to feel like that concept from Nintendo and that kind of Nintendo will have run its course for a while. And so maybe coming into the next couple of consoles for Nintendo, maybe not the direct successor to the Switch, but maybe even the one after that. God, we're going so far into the future here. But maybe at some point, one of those consoles, Nintendo says, hey, now it's worth it. Now it makes sense. Now we can easily and comfortably afford spending money on, you know, groundbreaking tech. And it just seems like the next evolutionary step for Nintendo at that point, maybe that will happen. And Nintendo says, hey, now with our Switch 3.0, you know, it's 2025, we have a Switch 3.0 or whatever it's going to be coming out. This is the time for us to say, okay, we need the most powerful, most dope and kick-ass and amazing GPU and CPU and all these different technological specs. We need that in our new console. Because it's entirely possible that maybe Nintendo feels like, I know I'm kind of repeating this, but once they've gone through all their innovations and their gimmicks and their unique controllers, they may feel like, okay, we need to go back into the power arena. Maybe that's when they're going to feel like it's going to be the new thing, because at that time, it almost would be the new thing for Nintendo, because it will have been over a decade. It's already been over a decade since Nintendo really did focus on graphics and power first. In a weird way, see if you guys can follow me here, it almost reminds me of what they're doing currently with the Switch and the cartridges, because we know they have little cartridge game card games for the Switch, which is awesome. We're all super excited for that. We know all the benefits over the disc-based thing. I mean, I'm so excited with what they're doing with that, and to have cartridges back in my life. And that is something that, as we all know, isn't new. I mean, gaming started on cartridges, obviously, way back in the day. The NES and the Super NES and Genesis. I mean, that was the standard for very, very long. And then we got to a period with gaming where it needed to evolve past what cartridges were doing. And in order to get a certain kind of graphical quality, and more than anything, people don't really remember this, but the next level of sound, to get actual like CD and movie sound and voice acting in games, that really kind of had to start back in the 90s with the disc-based stuff from the PlayStation and Saturn. And nowadays, we are so far removed from that point and that period of technology and gaming that going back to cartridges almost in a weird roundabout way actually does feel new again. Many people have made this point. What's old again is new again. Cartridges are 20 years old, but bringing them back in 2017 literally feels new, not to mention how many younger gamers, 15, 18, 20-year-old gamers never grew up with cartridge gaming. So to them, it technically is new, which blows my mind, and I feel so sorry for all you young dudes and dudettes out there, man, who grew up that way. But it is what it is. Now you're going to get cartridges back in your life, and it's really, really exciting. So in a weird way, if Nintendo, just speaking within the pantheon of Nintendo and how they've been as their own company, not the larger video game industry, but just Nintendo, they haven't focused on graphics in such a way since now 2001 when the GameCube came out. So if in 2020, 23, 25, they eventually change their whole business model for whatever new console they're coming out with that time to say, hey, now we're not really doing so many gimmicky weird controller things. We're just making our system with amazing graphics and the dopest tech available that we could afford to make this a revolutionary power console. If they did that, it will have been so long since Nintendo focused on power and graphics that it will literally feel new for Nintendo. For Nintendo fans, for Nintendo gamers like myself and a lot of you guys, and for the company to have a business model and a hardware home console model centered around, trying to push brand new power and brand new tech. And I think that that's a really cool, interesting idea, which is why I wanted to bring it up on the video. This is nothing but theoretical and speculative, obviously. We have a Switch coming out. Powerful as the Xbox One or not, that's going to be amazing. That's in 3 weeks. That's what we should focus our time and attention on. That being said, I've now spent 12 or 13 minutes totally distracting you from what's going to happen in a couple of weeks to talk about the future of Nintendo Beyond, because I think it's an interesting thing to think about. Will it ever make sense for Nintendo to focus on graphics and power again? And if so, would that be a bad thing? Part of the purpose of this video and conversation for me is to state that if it's done right and at the right time, I don't think it'll be a bad thing. Like I said, it's completely okay to want great power and great specs and great graphics out of games and gaming systems. A lot of people, a lot of gamers, and even a lot of companies do the wrong thing with that idea. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about focusing so much on graphics and power that you're spending way too much money, you're costing the consumer too much money, and you're creating poor content and poor software. If you're focusing on the graphics so much that the games you're making aren't good, that's the problem. But I think that we all know that if Nintendo came back to pushing graphics and power over unique controllers and UIs, that they would still do it and make amazing games just like they did on the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, and the GameCube, because that is the Nintendo we know. Whether they're focusing on controllers or focusing on graphics, the number one thing that they will never change about themselves is their quality control and how badass they want to make all of their games and all of their sequels and all of their franchises and the gaming experience for the gamer. They don't have to give us a unique controller to do that. Every once in a while, they can give us a basic controller and a basic system with great graphics, but still make amazing gameplay innovations. And that's just a Nintendo that we know and love. And it's really, really exciting to think about, I think. So like I said, just a fun little distraction video, a concept that I've been thinking about for probably 2 or 3 months, actually. I thought about making a video on this probably 8 or 9 weeks ago, and it just didn't really make sense to make it at any given time. Today is a day where it's like, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, man. I've got this free time on a Sunday, and it's like, this is something I wanted to bring up to people, talk about on the channel, and just kind of gauge you guys and see how you all feel about this. Will it ever make sense for Nintendo to focus more on graphics and power? Will they ever be that company again? It's really the kind of the jumping off point I used in this video is the fact that there was a time for several generations in a row where Nintendo was that company. And so the whole question is, will they ever come back to being that company? Will it ever make sense? Or is that completely gone and in Nintendo's past and they have no reason to worry about that or revisit again? Like I said, I don't think they'll ever need to do it. I think they can continue the way they've been doing things, not focusing so much. Reggie even said, a couple of months ago, and I think this was even still NX days, you guys might have to remember, remind me, where he was like, yeah, for us, it's not about the specs, it's about the games and the gameplay. And that's the Nintendo that will always continue, and I do love that and think that they could continue that way. But that doesn't mean it's impossible that in 15 or 10 years or something, Nintendo doesn't decide that it might be time to focus on graphics again. I mean, it really may make sense. So what do you guys think? Could you see Nintendo doing this? If they did, would it be the right move? Or could you ever see the gaming industry existing in a space where it did make sense for Nintendo to do this in a positive way? Or do you think it would only be a negative thing because graphics are super terrible and you never like pretty graphics and just don't make it about the specs, make it about the whatever. If that's how you feel, share that below. Tell me what you guys think about this idea. I thought this was a really fun topic and I enjoyed talking about it with you guys. So this, of course, is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Thank you as always for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you next time on another video.